When you give your attention to something, especially something unknown, it's like lighting a candle in a dark forest. You might think that you're just observing the dark, but everything in the dark can see the light you've made. When we talk about dark or scary things, are we just telling stories, or are we opening a door to something, inviting it in? Welcome back. I'm Krista, and you're listening to Alice in the Unknown. Today, it's just me, no guest, but I wanted to come on and share a personal story of mine. Also, I just wanted to say before we start, I did have an episode ready to post on Saturday, but it wasn't exactly what I wanted, and I was having some issues with sound, so I'm re-recording, and hopefully I can get this out during the week. Also, instead of posting on Saturdays, I am going to try to post on Monday or Tuesday. We will see, but it'll just be easier for me to edit the podcast on the weekend instead of rushing to get it out. I started this podcast at a crazy time in my life. I just moved last weekend, and this week I am a maid of honor in one of my best friend's weddings, but I just wanted to squeeze this one in here because it is something that's very interesting and is one of the main reasons that I am so intrigued, I think, in the supernatural and unknown world. So I grew up Christian, and if you listened to my last episode, I'm sure you would have got that from my mom talking about deliverance and her experience working in the church. So that's how I grew up, experiencing these kind of things, talking about these kind of things. The story starts when I was about 13 or 12 years old. I went to a few different camps growing up that were Christian Bible camps. Most of my siblings had went to this camp. This is located in Canada, Alberta. And this one camp was close to our house. It was on the other side of the lake. So it was about 15 minutes from my house. So I went a few years in a row, and it was a fun camp. I always had fun playing games and making new friends. Anyways, so this year, I was probably about 13 years old. It was my last year going there, and the campground had cabins, so we weren't in tents. It was all cabins, and each cabin had about probably 8 kids and then one counselor. She was probably late teens, maybe early 20s, in charge of 8 kids. And we all had bunk beds. And then we would eat in a different building. And then we'd also have what they called is chapel, which is pretty much just listening to the pastor, talk about the Bible and different things. So it was near the last night at camp, maybe like a Thursday or Friday, and the last day would have been Saturday. On this night chapel, it was late, probably like 9 o'clock. We'll say the last thing we had in the day, and the pastor was talking about the book of Revelation. Now, I don't know why they chose to talk about this topic with a bunch of young kids, but if you don't know what the book of Revelation is, it's pretty much the end time book in the Bible. When they talk about the rapture and end times, all of that is in that book. So it's not very bedtime friendly. After the chapel, we all went back to our cabins, and we had maybe 30 minutes to an hour left to just wind down before we had to go to bed. And what did we do? Of course, we were talking about what we just talked about in chapel, about the end times, about demons, just kind of scary stuff. And we were kind of scared. It wasn't a good topic to be talking about right before bed, especially when you're young. But with that, at this point, I am in my mind back then felt like old enough. Like I wasn't scared of the dark. I could walk in the forest. I grew up in the country, so the dark didn't really scare me. I would go for walks at night with my friends, and I would be the ones telling the scary stories, scaring my friends when they had to walk home. So I wasn't really scared, but just talking about these kind of things always kind of like fire me up. I get really excited and intrigued about talking about this kind of stuff with other people, getting their opinions, and we're all very in deep conversation about this dark kind of stuff and times. And then it was lights out, so we have to go to bed. 11 o'clock, it's like, okay, everyone's cabin lights have to go out. We turn the lights off. We're ready for bed. I'm on the bottom bunk, and there's probably about 4 girls on my side of the cabin and another 4 on the other side of the cabin. I'm sitting there in my bed, and I just feel this really nasty feeling. I don't know how to describe it. People say the hairs on your arms stand up. That's the kind of feeling I was getting. It was just like my stomach was like twirling, and the atmosphere around me just felt like really negative, gloomy, and it just felt really intensely dark around me. I do think that I am sensitive. I don't know if that's because I grew up religious and my mom is very sensitive to the spirit world, and I grew up talking and thinking about this kind of stuff, but it wasn't just me that felt this. So when I was laying there, I'm talking myself down like, it's nothing. I've been scared before as a kid. It felt a lot different than just being paranoid in your bed. But I was just like, no, it's okay. Just go to bed. It's going to be fine. And all of a sudden, the girl across the room on the top bunk by the window started just bawling and screaming. Of course, our counselor jumps out of bed, turns the lights on. At this point, we're all freaked out. Like, all the girls are like, what is going on? She's crying and crying and crying. We're trying to get her to talk. At this point, I'm just like, oh my God, because I was feeling something not good. What did she feel, or what did she see? So when she finally stops crying enough to be able to speak, she tells us that she saw something outside the window. Now, I wish I could describe it to you, but all I can remember at that time is she said it was, from her perspective, a demon outside the window, and it told her it was coming to get her. I know, it sounds absolutely bizarre, but this is what we were dealing with. So at the time that she told us this, then everyone on my side of the room had started saying that they felt something like swirling around. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, I'm not the only one that felt that. Like, it wasn't just in my head. It was so strong that I knew it, but at the same time, I was just trying to talk myself, out of it, and that it was just in my head. But when I found out other people was experiencing this too, I'm not the only one. Then the girls on the other side of the cabin, the side that the girl was screaming, all said that they saw something flying around my side of the cabin, where all the girls said they felt something. They said that they saw, like, it was dark, but they could see this figure like flying and swirling above our bunk beds. So I don't know what it was, some kind of entity, if you want to call it a demon, a spirit, a ghost, I don't know, but something was there. We felt it and they saw it. And the one girl said she saw something outside as well. We are freaking out. Like, what do we do? Nothing this intense has happened to me in my life. And we were all just freaked out, crying and praying and just doing whatever we could do at that moment with what knowledge we had. And after we realized, okay, we need to go to the bathroom because some girls needed to go, and we're also a mess from crying and bawling, we need to go blow our nose, except the bathroom isn't in our cabin. It's across the campground. So we have to go out into the forest after one of the girls just said she saw a demon out there. and we have to go obviously together because no one wants to stay alone in the cabin. We all hold hands in a line, walked to the bathroom, and we made it there fine. Nothing else happened. We cleaned ourselves up. We came back to the cabin and we put all our beds together on the floor, like took our mattress off our bunk beds and everyone's sleeping together. We were traumatized by this. When we finally got to sleep, I'm sure it maybe took longer for some girls. Definitely didn't fall asleep right away after all of this, but it was really scary, and I will never forget the way I felt in my bed, feeling this energy around me just totally shift. The next day, it was really weird because everyone in the camp kind of felt off. The energy was off. Everyone was acting a little strange. We were told by our counselor not to talk about it with anyone. Like, hush, keep quiet. We don't really know what it was. We didn't want to scare the other kids. But, being kids, you're going to talk. And another friend that I had from another cabin had said to me that something else happened to them as well. Something very similar. She didn't go into detail because I don't think I told her in detail either, but we both just knew that something happened, like we were both attacked. And multiple cabins also experienced the same things. The next day we went home and that was it. We didn't really get to talk to any other kids about it. I wish I could have and got their full experience if it was the exact same. All I know is that something also very terrifying happened to them in the middle of the night. Ever since, I will never forget this experience because this is one of the things that have made me a real believer in the supernatural and in the spirit realm, because there is something else out there. Whether it's a demon, an entity, a ghost, whatever you want to name it, there is something that we cannot see all the time. Some people can see it, some people can feel it. There is something out there. That's my experience at camp all those years ago. So whether you believe my story or not, I know what I felt that night. To me, it is very real. So the main question when we talk about dark or scary things, do we invite something in? I've thought about that night at camp for years, and I've told many people my experience. What exactly did we stir up that night? Was it just fear? A bunch of kids in the dark, our imagination running wild after talking about the book of Revelation and the end times? Or did we actually invite something in? The more you talk about dark things like ghosts, demons, even fear itself, the more it starts to show up around you. It's almost like an energy of those conversations calls something closer. Some people think it's just suggestion. You talk about fear so you notice it more. You tell ghost stories and suddenly everything sounds suspicious. Everything feels suspicious. But sometimes it's more than that. It makes me wonder, do we create that energy, or does something already waiting in the dark simply hear us? Even in the Bible, it warns about the power of the tongue. Words create and words destroy. With witches, they use words to cast spells. Across different beliefs and cultures, you see the same message that words have power. Even in modern pop culture, you see it with things like Bloody Mary, skinwalkers. You don't say their names, especially in certain circumstances. Maybe those stories come from something true. The understanding that words are more than just sounds, their intent, emotion, and energy. When we mix in fear, maybe that's what opens the door. Not a physical one, but something unseen. A door to the energy around us. I also think that the collective fear in a group setting can amplify paranormal experiences. Because someone else experienced, it makes your experience feel so much more real. And the fear, it just builds on that. Can fear itself really attract spiritual energy, or does it just make us aware of what's already there? Was there something waiting? and already going to present itself to us, or because we were talking about these dark topics, it opened the door to come and put that fear in us. And is that what the presence, whatever it was, wanted? Was to scare us? I don't know. I have not had a similar experience since this, to the fear that I felt laying in that bed. You probably heard of the law of attraction. It's been around for a long time, dressed up in different names and beliefs, but the idea is simple. What you think about, you draw towards you. Some people call it manifestation, others call it energy, vibration, or even faith. Deep down, it's all the same. Your thoughts have power. So the law of attraction says that our minds are like magnets. When we focus on fear, fear finds us. When we focus on gratitude, happiness, opportunities, that appears. It sounds simple, even comforting, until you realize it works both ways, because your thoughts can call in the good. They can also call in the dark. Science says that our brains are wired to look for patterns. The more we talk about something, the more we notice it. Maybe the law of attraction isn't just about getting what you want. It's also about inviting what you speak of most. Whether you call it energy, prayer, or intention, it's all the same force. It's easy to dismiss moments like the one I had at camp, to explain them away as mass hysteria, suggestion, or nerves. And maybe that's all it was. But deep down, I still remember the feeling I had, the feeling that something unseen was moving among us. This doesn't mean that we can never talk about dark things. Shadow work, facing the things that scare us, is essential for growth. But it does mean that intention matters. And maybe that's why it's so important to be mindful of what we speak into existence. Talking about ghosts, demons, or the unknown doesn't make you bad or cursed, but it's not something to do carelessly either. Maybe the key isn't to stop talking about darkness, but to understand it, to face it without feeding it, to acknowledge it without inviting it in. Because when we speak of these things, they listen. When I was a kid in this experience, I didn't fully understand. I mean, it's still hard to understand what exactly happened, whether we were targeted by something bigger because we were youth and had impressionable minds, or our innocence, and we were easy targets. I have no idea. Or if it's something that we focused our energy because we were so scared of all these topics, and that brought this fear to our doorsteps, to our cabin. I don't know, but let me know what you think this experience was. Do you believe in ghosts? Do you believe in demons? Have you ever experienced anything like this? I want to know. This is why I started this podcast, is to explore these topics and share these stories. I want to have as many personal stories as I can. Maybe in the future, I can do listener stories of listeners' personal experiences, as well as I will have more guests on with their personal experiences. But I wanted to come on and tell you mine, because this is something that I have thought about for many, many years, and it will never leave my mind. Anytime anyone asks me if I have a spooky story, I'm like, oh yeah, I got one, because I will never forget the way I felt and the fear that I had. And it's definitely made me a believer of the unknown and the supernatural. And so, yeah, thank you for listening. Please rate, like, and share the podcast, because that will help it grow. One other thing is I do have an Instagram, and it is Alice in the Unknown. You can follow if you want to keep up with updates. I do try to keep you guys in the loop if anything's going to be happening. And my goal is to post every week eventually, but at the start, maybe every second week. I don't know. I will give a heads up when I post on Instagram if you want to stay in touch, or you can also follow here and just wait until you see an episode. Thanks for listening. Bye.